What event or incident happened at your job that caused a mass firing or mass quitting? I work in local government for an urban county. One of the IT departments reclassified all their employees as exempt, a designation designed for political appointments, fired them all. Only exempt employees can be fired without cause, and asked them to submit resumes if they wanted their jobs back. Their goal was to get rid of some employees they felt were deadweight, but it turns out the most valued employees, the ones with readily marketable skills in the prime of their careers, just shook their heads and had jobs elsewhere by the end of the week. Furthermore, when you pull a stunt like that, word gets out, and resumes don't come flooding in. They are still trying to recover. Story 2. I was the lead cook in a $1 million kitchen at a multi-million dollar high-end restaurant. The executive chef had been there since they opened and worked his way from the bottom to the top in 4 years. That place was his whole life, and he was completely dedicated to it. The absentee owners had hired a do-nothing, know-nothing manager. After weeks of complaining, the owners had a meeting with the manager and gave him a week to get on top of his job. The chef went on vacation that week. The manager saw that as an opportunity to buddy up with owners. A week and 2 rounds of golf. Later, the chef comes back to work to a pink slip. 27 of 30 employees came in and resigned immediately after. Story 3. Train company in Sweden. One day, many years ago, someone found a document stating some changes to overtime policy. It was just lying on a table in the middle of the break room. 1 copy only. Due to the nature of the business, there tends to be a lot of shifting hours back and forth. Sometimes we, drivers, can get home hours and hours early, and other times we get horrendously late, hence overtime. This document stated that now overtime forms had to be filled for when we came home early. Undertime, so to speak. This otherwise already scheduled time would be withdrawn, and the company would then be able to reuse that time. Negative overtime. 1 copy on a table, and a few hours later, people had come in from all over in a major huff. There were outright and immediate resignation, shouting matches, phone calls to union representatives, a huge outcry overall. Date on the document and the day it was found, April 1st. Much fun was had. Story 4. All the engineers at one job I was in had their contracts changed to that they had to buy their own tools. Due to the specialist nature of our jobs, we were all looking at over £4,000 per engineer. 10 walked and the rest threatened to strike. The boss had to give in and buy the tools himself. Story 5. In the early 90s, I worked for a large construction company in Florida. I was on the road crew. One of the machines we used was called a mixer. The objective of this machine was to mix up the subgrade of a road. It has giant teeth that spin insanely fast. Well, my crew had laid down the dirt, lime rock and clay, and now had to run the mixer over it. Well, someone set the blades too low and ripped an international fiber optic cable out of the ground. A clean cut would have been bad, but this cable was shredded beyond belief. It cost $100,000 per hour that this cable was down. Luckily, I wasn't at work that day. When I came in the next day, anyone who was even near the incident got fired. My whole crew was extinct. To put into perspective, the cable was fatter than your upper leg and composed of thousands of glass strands. Every strand had to be fused back together. It cost the company millions. Total, about 40 people were fired, and I was put on another crew. Story 6. From what I understood, I caused a domino effect at a local big chain pizza. The pizza place I worked at wasn't a full-service restaurant, which they're mainly known for. It was a takeout or delivery-only store, located in a shopping center with several other businesses. During the 2 years I worked there, we had gone through 3 store managers. The first manager was awesome. He was firm, strict, but fair. The second manager was a bit of a ditz. He went by the book, but you could tell his heart wasn't really in it. I think he preferred to be a driver than a manager. The third manager was an all-out git. She mistreated the employees, especially the men, and she'd do things that only benefited her, not others. I was getting fed up. She had put a suggestion box outside her office. I wrote a very lengthy suggestion that she treat her employees with respect. She basically fired me. She said I'd resigned. I didn't care. I was no longer under her tyrannical rule. A friend of mine who still worked there called me a week later and told me 3 other people quit because, like me, they got tired of her crap. Later that same year, I quit late summer. About 2 weeks after Halloween, my parents ordered a pizza from that pizza place's major competitor. They asked me to give the driver the money, and when I did, it turned out to be a driver I knew from the other place. She told me she quit on Halloween night because she wanted to take her 4-year-old trick-or-treating, but the manager said no. Then she, the manager, took off early, in the middle of a ducking rush, to take her own 8-year-old daughter trick-or-treating. The driver that was now working for the competitor told me she threw her hat at the manager, told her to duck off, and quit right there. A year or 2 later, I ran into the old assistant manager who was now working at an Arby's. She told me many others had quit and that manager was no longer there. She and her husband were fired due to stealing money from that store. Story 7. I used to work at a pickle factory in Michigan. When the new owners took over, They insisted they change the recipe that had been the same for over 50 years without consulting the workers. Some of the employees' parents and grandparents had worked there and apparently felt so strongly about the recipe that 13 people quit, and the majority else were outside with signs the next days until eventually they switched it almost all the way back. None of those who quit came back. I didn't quit and actually enjoyed both recipes, but now I can't tolerate the smell or taste of pickles. I used to love them. Story 8. Oh boy. I think I might have a story that wins. When I was in high school, I took a part-time job doing tech support for a dial-up SP. The company was pretty small and only had a handful of employees. The owner's wife did HR and accounting. Her brother was in charge of the technical operations and was my boss, plus a web developer and the regular tech support guy who were best friends. There were also a handful of developers at a sister company which develops custom software. My work schedule was evenings a few days per week, plus normal hours on the weekend. My boss was usually there before me on Saturdays. But one week, I was surprised to find the office locked. As the day progressed, I became increasingly confused by the fact that nobody else had shown up. There was almost always a few people at least passing through, but I'd been there all morning without seeing anyone at all. Finally, after a few hours, my boss walks in and said, "You're probably wondering where everyone is." He told me that everyone except me, the owner, and his wife had quit. He wouldn't say why, but assured me that it wasn't something I needed to worry about, and that, since his job was vital, he was going to stay at the company until a replacement could be found. I tried to find out what was happening, but he said I'd have to talk to the owner. When the owner arrived, there was clearly tension between the two of them. He also wouldn't tell me what had happened, but was very eager to make sure I wasn't going to jump ship. Eventually, they hired new employees and found a replacement for my boss, and things went back to normal. But I still didn't have any idea what the hell had happened, and the owner clearly wasn't interested in discussing it. Cut to a few months later. I'm walking around the show floor at the Macworld conference in New York when I bump into the former tech support guy and former web developer. We spent a few minutes catching up, then the tech support guy grins and says, "So do you know what happened? Why everyone quit?" "No, but I've certainly been curious. Owner didn't tell me and I didn't want to pry." Tech: "He and his wife got excommunicated." Blank stare. Tech: "Didn't you know we're all Jehovah's Witnesses?" Apparently, everyone knew each other from church, and Jehovah's Witnesses aren't allowed to have anything to do with people who have been excommunicated. It wasn't until years later that I learned that the owner and his wife love group sex, and someone in the church found out. Story 9. Michael Jackson pass at our hospital. There were many HIPAA violations, as doctors, nurses, and staff all kept leaking information to their friends, family, and to the media, specifically TMZ. Story 10. I worked for an $800 million per year system integrator in the Southeast. Each department had 2 leads. The first was typically an MBA who served as a liaison to sales and marketing. The second was the engineering lead that was responsible for platform integration, testing, and coordinating with the support and network services. I was the engineering lead. Our VP was one of those guys who promotes a hyper-competitive environment and wanted the company to staffed with sharks, not sheep. When I got there, what little documentation there was on systems and processes was horribly outdated or non-existent. I changed all of that, worked obscene hours, and I would personally travel to high-revenue client sites if there were problems. That work paid off with a $22 million rugged server contract. At this point, I had served 3 years with this company. It wasn't that old, and I climbed the ranks fast. I was making new college grad pay, which was about $6,000 below the median household income for my area. I know what you're thinking. Engineering team lead with a dismal salary? The job market wasn't great here, so at that point I was just happy to get my first job. This isn't the place you stay to work in any form of engineering or technology, but I wasn't ready to leave yet. I asked for a raise, and honestly, I was only hoping for $1 or $2 an hour raise. I was told that they couldn't do it. Keep in mind I had been working 60-hour weeks, training the support team on system and assisting network engineers, and the stress level was unbearable, and it pretty much destroyed my first marriage. I felt really defeated. Fast forward about 3 weeks, and a friend in the field asks me if I'd be interested in doing backups, server maintenance, and interface work for a hospital. He said the pay isn't amazing, but it would be a lot more laid back. At that point, it sounded like heaven. When I put in my notice, the VP completely freaked out. He said, "If this is about money, we can get you more money." This is literally about 3 weeks after he told me they couldn't give me a minimal raise. I said that I had already accepted the job, and he offered to double my salary. I was completely floored, but I was also really pissed off. I quit on principle. I spent my last 2 weeks making sure my partner and subordinates knew how things were done, where documentation was, and I did a DoD grade wipe of my desktop system when I left. In a complete lack of oversight, they didn't kill my VPN access or email account. I thought it was weird, but I figured I'd check my email for a while after I left to make sure that I notified any senders of personal email that I didn't have that address anymore. I then noticed that someone was sending email and signing it with my name. They were even referencing events from interactions I had with some of these. Needless to say, I set up an auto-respond email on a Friday after I was sure everybody had gone home. I typically got hundreds of emails over the weekend, and they all got an automated response that I hadn't been employed with the company for over a month and left a forwarding address. My former coworkers heard about it, and they thought it was shady as hell. They had also tried to push all of my old work onto them, and one of the guys that I hung around with socially and still do told me that they told one guy that he couldn't leave on time one day to see a play his daughter was in. It was an event he told them about weeks in advance. That's when the domino effect began. Within the span of a month, the other manager, the team leads, the specialists, and the techs had all quit. There was no more enterprise products engineering department. They hired some kids fresh out of college that ran it into the ground, and subsequently, they lost every single CNE, MCSE, and CCIE. They were super sharp guys when it came to networking, but they needed support on the back end for enterprise hardware. I have never felt so vindicated in my life. I've heard that after that, the VP was moved out of a management position. They asked me to come back more than once, and I refused. I stopped answering their calls. I actually made a little less than I did there at the new job, but now I make about twice. I'm also fully vested for retirement and have much better benefit. I guess the double salary thing paid off in the long run, and I went back to school to get another degree. I'm 3 classes from finishing, and I really like this job. I really like my team and the creative freedom I have too. Story 11. I worked at a Dave & Buster's in a fairly low-income area. We had parties of 8 or more come in regularly, and they would run up $200 checks, which was fine since they had an automatic 18% gratuity for being such a large party. They decided to eliminate the large party gratuity option in hopes that it would inspire servers to work harder. Instead, we all started getting regularly stiffed on these massive checks. Within 3 weeks, over a third of our staff quit. Story 12. Gather round, children, and let me regale you with a tale of retail misery and woe. About 7 years back, I worked at Best Buy. My store was located across from one of the busiest malls in the Northeast, in an area that was a mix of lower and upper class. Around July, the store started doing one of those promotions wherein they offer you magazines at checkout. You sign up for 5 free ones, and then if you don't cancel, you start getting charged the yearly subscription fee for them. The cashiers were incentivized to get as Man magazine subscriptions as possible. As I worked loss prevention, I really didn't care at all about this program. I didn't care until October. Suddenly, we started getting massive complaints about people getting charged for subscriptions who never signed up for them. It started as 1 or 2, and we just assumed they forgot to cancel. But soon, several dozen angry customers were complaining to us, corporate, and anyone who would listen. We started an investigation. Lots of hot and crafty hours going through camera footage and register logs. Turns out, one of the cashiers, who was never an okay employee even on her best day, figured out she could just sign people up for the magazine, even if they said no, as long as they were a rewards card member and their info was in the system. She used this to get record number of subscriptions and won the weekly prizes every week until the other cashiers caught on and started doing the same. In the end, it turns out that every single front register area cashier had done this, except for one kid who was hired a few weeks before the investigation. Word came down from corporate that we had to fire every single cashier except for the new kid. Oh, and the day they handed down this judgment, the Friday before Black Friday. That's right. With 1 week to spare before the biggest shopping day of the year, we were ordered to fire all of our cashiers. As you can imagine, this did not go over well with management, but their hands were tied. So we tried to hire and train as many people as we could in a week. But as you can imagine, that Black Friday was chaos. Some employees worked 20 hours straight, 10 in their department and 10 on front register. All managers and supervisors worked close to 24 hours. They even tried to convince LP to lend a hand, to which we laughed, of course. I don't want to know how much they lost between the lawsuits from the customers for fraud and the labor board fines and complaints filed by employees held late on Black Friday. Story 13. My company has had a pay freeze for over 7 years. We've had 10 employees quit in our office due to this. The work is rather hard, and we are expected to work up to state standard, yet we are paid near minimum wage. We have patients, lives in our hand. Story 14. Several things are happening right now. Mandated 36-hour shifts. Mandated overtime shifts changed from 2 a month to 8 a month. Refusal to allow people to go part-time. We have lost and will lose 20 people by the end of the month. Story 15. We lost a third of our staff over the course of 3 months. People hate where I work, including myself. I work in HR. Try having to deal with 100 staff, leaving in a short time frame. Generally, people were fed up with the stupid crap that goes on here. false promises, failing to deliver, promising change, keeping poor performers because they're too desperate for staff, hiring stupid ducking people. I did say I work in HR, but I have no pull. I'm just the lowest on the totem pole, practically a glorified secretary. Also, I have to be chipper and supportive of the bad decisions that get made around here. I'm convinced my managers don't like me, especially my direct report, because I speak my mind. I want to get the duck out of here. Job interview of my life is tomorrow. Perhaps I can put all this nonsense behind me here. I finished work, then headed to the airport. Here's the preamble to this job. I applied to it on a whim. I threw my name in the hat, thinking, there isn't a chance in hell these guys are going to call me back. Sure enough, they did, to which I couldn't even eat that day. And the only words I could say were, holy ducking crap. So, I had to do a phone interview with these guys, and I knocked it out of the park. I never felt so confident in an interview in my life. I took a huge risk at the end of my interview by making a joke about one of their local sports teams. That happens to have a huge fan base. I said, it isn't going to be an issue that I'm not a local sports team fan, is it? And they loved it. Huge risk. I wasn't trying to sound cocky, I just wanted to lighten the situation. And it paid off because right now I'm sitting in an airport hotel and getting ready to leave for my flight to interview with these guys tomorrow. It's in a city that's a 9-hour drive from where I currently live, and they're flying me out there. I can't believe it. Now, I don't want to get ahead of myself here. They're flying me out there. Yes, but I still have to do an interview tomorrow, and it's down to me and probably 3 other candidates. I will mention, I'm the only out-of-area candidate they're flying in. I have to deliver tomorrow, and it will be all business, but it happens that I have a real nice green tie that will complement the local sports team's colors. Story 16? In a team of 38 consultants that had been working a big project for a couple years, the standing offer that governed rates, etc., had been defined and would continue for the next few years. But the renewal deadline for each of our individual contracts with the contracting middleman was just a week away, and we hadn't seen the paperwork, just promises that we were being renewed. Finally get the paperwork and see a 10% cut in rates. Quite surprised because the standing offer didn't have any such change. Contracting company says the client department renegotiated new rates by saying that another company could be used instead. We were shocked that the client would put such a big project at risk. People made inquiries. It turns out the client department made no such changes. The contracting company was just making a grab for a bigger piece of the pie. There was outrage. People quit. Other yelled and got fired, etc. The company had to quickly backpedal and claim it was an administrative error. You're right. But the damage was... It didn't end there, though. About 6 months later, a small group of consultants on another project merged with us. They had been working under the same contract vehicle. As we're getting to know these 5 guys, one of them says, that 30% cut 6 months ago was nasty, eh? Turns out the company got from these guys what they couldn't get from us, and these poor suckers hadn't known it was a fiction. Crap hits the fan once again. The 5 quit en masse. Problem was their jobs were critical. They got hired back with hefty raises, almost double their original if memory serves. Stupid, greedy company. Story 17. It was a mass firing of many of the employees from a distribution center. It was a consumer electronics company, TVs, VCRs. This was in the 1970 IAS. Cassette players, amplifiers, tuners, equalizers, etc. I was the parts department supervisor at the time, so I spent my time making sure that repair parts were sent out on a timely basis. The company had 3 categories of stock. A, which was new and could be sold to the retail market. B, which was refurbished and was only sold to a limited market with a limited warranty. And C, which was cosmetically damaged and could only be purchased by employees and was never supposed to be resold. Prices were dirt cheap just to move the goods so they didn't sit around the warehouse. Senior management got the bright idea of reclassifying a stock to C stock and buying it themselves. They were, of course, reselling the materials to anyone and everyone, including some of the retail stores that they had established relationships with. I knew this was going on, but I was young, married, and had a child and a mortgage, and simply could not afford to buy anything, even if I could turn a profit on it. So one day, a senior VP from corporate headquarters walks in unannounced. We usually had advance notice of their coming in. He walks straight into the branch manager's office without saying anything to anyone and closes the door. About a half hour later, the branch manager comes out of his office, white as a ghost, and leaves the building. The SVP, who has now taken over the branch manager's office, sends for the sales manager who goes in, closes the door, and exits about 1 hour later. Also white as a ghost, and he promptly leaves the building. On it goes. Rumors are running rampant, but since each person leaves the building, and this is before cell phones and texting, no one is really sure what has happened. The service manager, my boss, then the office manager, then the quality control manager, the warehouse manager, then they start with the supervisors. Eventually, they get around to me, and I'm crapting. So I go into the office and said, "Hi, Dave." I knew him from past meetings, etc. And he immediately asks me what I knew about the C-stock sales. I feigned ignorance about what the others were doing and told him that I had all the equipment I needed and could afford, so I hadn't bought any. He tells me that he is firing people who were obviously abusing the employee purchase program and that because I hadn't abused it, I would not be let go. But he says I have to leave the building without saying anything to anyone and to go home until I heard from him. He took down my phone number and away I went. Several hours later, Dave calls me back into the building and asks if I am familiar with inventory and cycle counting, and I said sure. We did cycle counting in the parts department regularly and had an annual physical inventory of the entire building once a year. He tells me to schedule one to be done over the upcoming weekend for all the finished goods. He also tells me that I am now the highest-ranking employee at the site and that I would be running the building until they could hire replacements for the individuals that were let go. I ran that building for 4 or 5 months and never even got a raise or promotion, although Dave took my wife and I out to a very expensive dinner as a thank you for keeping my nose clean. Story 18. I was in the Navy for 6 years, and I saw people get kicked out for various reasons. Asterisk, some people were using a closet as a paint storage room, smoke break room. It caught fire, and we nearly lost the ship. The XO, and everyone involved were canned. I was a nuclear reactor operator. The nuclear power operators are continuously having their level of knowledge about nuclear physics and reactor operations tested. I'm not talking multiple choice questions either. Every question was essay style. This incentivizes cheating, and cheating rings are busted up frequently. The machinery division and the training division on my ship lost a bunch of people due to a cheating ring. There is a no-tolerance policy for substances in the military, and we lost 3 people in a substances sweep once. One more. At the Nuclear Training Command, there was a guy with a lot of substances offenses on his record. He got waivers for them, so no big deal. During the routine background check, it was discovered that he forgot to include an offense. The command took him off to the side, and of what they told him was this: "We know you're still doing substance and doing them with people here on base because you're a crafty person and lied on your enlistment paperwork. We're going to kick you out of the military with a dishonorable discharge unless you tell us who you're doing substance. If you tell us, we'll just kick you out with an other than honorable." The difference between dishonorable and oath is that under a dishonorable discharge, you are considered a felon. This isn't quite accurate. If you are discharged dishonorably, you aren't exactly considered a felon. You do lose all VAGI and tuition assistance benefits, and it's a permanent mark on your job record. You also are not eligible for hire by the government, and certain businesses have contracts with the government to not ever hire someone with a dishonorable discharge. McDonald's is one example. Because of the offer, the guy said he was doing substances with 5 other people in his class. They were all pulled out of training and put on hold for a few months. They were screened for substance and questioned. Nothing was uncovered. After a few months, the co decided that they were untrustworthy anyway, so he kicked them out of the nuclear power program and sent them as undesignated rates to work on ships. One of the 5 end his life because of. Story 19. I worked in the corporate headquarters for a large national retailer. After 20 years in business, the company was sold to an arrogant billionaire who put his son in charge, his first job after completing his MBA. The son decided to relocate headquarters 500 miles away, close to his daddy's headquarters. He gave us 30 days' notice to move with no moving compensation or lose our jobs. Out of 300 employees, 1 moved. I'd already been looking for a job. The writing was on the wall. I accepted a new position the day after the announcement and gave 2 weeks' notice. My boss went ballistic, said, "What are we supported to do? No one can fill you job here, and we won't have anyone new until we move. You're not a team player." Bonus. The company was out of business within 60 days after the move, 4 months after the acquisition. They had spent $50 million to buy it. Story 20. My old workplace decided to do a complete overhaul of everyone's rotas. They went through an entire consultation period, asking people what they could and couldn't work, then completely ignored everyone's preferences and allocated shifts and rotas entirely based on the company's needs, completely invalidating the entire consultation period. People were being asked, expected to work more unsociable hours and weekends, and nobody was pleased by these changes. A lot of people left. Story 21. Worked in a bar and a nightclub. Restaurant by day, club by night. 5 bartenders behind the bar on any given Friday and Saturday, plus bar back. Thought something was weird about our credit card. Went to bar manager. We collect receipts and checkouts plus paychecks for a few weeks. Examine them. Someone is withholding quite a bit of our tips. Fast forward to a Friday night, busy as duck. Owner comes in to see how things are going. Bar manager confronts him. Owner denies wrongdoing. Claims what he's doing is legal. It wasn't. He was pocketing the withheld tips. Bar manager signals for me to come over, threatens to quit if the owner doesn't return the money he stole. Owner more or less says, "Tough crap," bar manager walks out. I lean into the bar long enough to tell one of the other bartenders what happened, give the owner a snarky wave, and follow him out. 5 minutes later, the rest of the bar staff joins us, and we wander down the road to another bar to commiserate over the bullcap. Left over 500 people in the club with no bar staff. 0 ducks given. Found out a few days later that the daytime serving staff heard what happened and quit too. Last I heard, they had to shut down for a few weeks to restaff. Still overly proud of myself for that. Damn that guy. Story 22. Someone pissed in a watering can in the storeroom when I worked in a Kmart. No one says him forward about it, so all the stocking staff who were on that night got sacked. Story 23. I worked at a place that provided parts and home services. I started a quitting chain there. When I started, we had an awesome manager. The dude was funny and took his job seriously. So, as an employee, it was awesome to come to work and have a laugh with the boss, then get a no-nonsense, no bullcrap explanation of what was expected for the day. And then he finally got his promotion. Awesome for him, crap for everyone else. And here's why. The company is failing, especially the home services area. Lots of people were let go just before the manager left. So now we've got a bunch of people doing double the work for the same pay and rip-off hours. Work 7.5 hours a day instead of 8. That way they don't have to consider you full-time and pay benefits. The new manager was a total git. She got transferred from a different location because she wasn't getting along with her other employees. Yeah, give her another chance in a bigger store with more people. Makes perfect sense. So, I'm starting to get real angry whenever I come into work because I've been moved from front counter to the back. I actually liked dealing with people and telling them the truth. According to new manager lady, I should be ripping people off. Lady comes in with a vacuum. My power head stopped working. I take it, plug it in, and hit the red reset button. Vacuum head work. Manager finds out and yells at me, "Should have put that in to be repaired. You cost us money." Yeah, because charging some mother $96 to press a button isn't just the crappiest thing ever. Anyhow, end up in the back doing some other guy's job. Turns out he was the king of pooch pound, so I could actually do all the work they expected to take a week in a day. They were also too cheap to replace my computer monitor and replaced it with a barely working TV that was returned. So naturally, I brought in my Xbox and spent a lot of time getting paid to play Batman. Whenever the manager was coming, my buddy would make bird sounds and I'd change back over to the comp. Then unfortunately, my grandfather passed and I missed 2 days of work. When I came back, I was yelled at for a long time about it from Guidey manager. Whatever, she's just stupid. I go on about my day and keep working. Everyone comes up to me. Did she just yell at you for mourning your grandfather? What a git. The next day begins, and this is where it gets a little fuzzy for stupid git calls me into her office to give me crap about being so far behind, and then I lost it. Basically, if someone close to you passed away, would you come into work? She replied with something about my grandfather's death being my fault and I saw red. I ducking lost my crap. I called her a fat ducking of an escort for sure, because my friend told me it was hilarious. I said a lot more than that, though, and left. About 30 minutes later, she picked a fight with someone else, who quit. Then a few front staff quit. Then a few data entry people quit. A week or two goes by and more of the backside has quit. Another week or two goes by and friend A has quit. A few days after that, friends B and C have quit. And that's a major blow since the dumb git manager was relying on friend B to run the front and friend C to run the back. Last I heard, the company finally fired stupid git. Whatever, they did it to themselves. The company is dying, and I'm happy it is. Story 24. Our general manager was fired. Everyone loved him. And they brought in a new GM who took away ending times to shifts. We had to stay until he said we could go while most of us were college students trying to schedule classes. And all of the employee perks. We even had to pay full price on dollar sub day. Everyone quit. There was only 2 of the same people working there 2 months later. Story 25. I was working retail, and many of the workers engaged in mass exodus because the only manager anybody really liked quit. The way it happened was this. One employee was a recent hire. He basically got the position because 2 of his friends already worked there and vouched for him. He regularly slacked off, got caught taking extra breaks, was never around when anybody needed him, and was generally a waste of space. One day, the manager everyone loves is on duty. He sends this kid out to collect carts from the lot. Now, a big group of this kid's friends had just arrived in the store. The kid goes and finds another employee and says, "Hey, the manager told me to tell you to go get carts out of the lot," and proceeds to follow his friends around the store doing nothing. Manager sees the other employee collecting carts and asks him why he's doing it, as it's not his usual duty. "Oh, so-and-so told me that you wanted me to get carts." Manager, knowing the kid has a record as a piss-poor employee, is furious, hunts him down in the store and takes him to the office for a reprimand. After the reprimand, the kid leaves out the front of the store. He brings back 2 carts over the next 20 minutes. Finally, manager notices that we are completely out of carts. It's now been half an hour since he reprimanded this kid and sent him to the lot. So he goes outside to see what's up. Kid is leaning against the front wall of the building on his phone with his girlfriend. Manager fires him on the spot. The kid goes to HR to get his last check the next day. Sits down with the HR manager and says that the manager everyone likes is selling substances to employees, many of whom were minors, on work time. then goes outside and calls the manager's work phone and leaves a message that he's going to duck him up for firing him. The whole store goes nuts. There are accusations flying from management at everybody. Every single employee is pulled to HR and interrogated. Did this manager ever sell you substances? Have you ever seen him sell someone else substance? Have you ever seen him use substances? Have you ever heard him talk about using substances? No. And everybody they talk to points the finger at this disgruntled ex-employee. Everyone knows he started the rumor mill going to try to get back at this manager. The manager plays the recorded message for management that this kid left on his work cell, but they dismiss it because there's no way to know it's him. Grilling continues for 3 or 4 days. Some people are pulled in for multiple interviews. Gossip starts that they're going to fire this manager. They don't have any solid evidence against him. But this ex-employee and his 2 friends who still work at the store have provided stories that match one another. Well, no crap. They hang out every day, and these interviews lasted almost a week. Enough that they think the manager needs to be fired. Manager doesn't wait for them to do it. He walks in one day and says, "Damn this, I quit. I drafted my letter of resignation when this crap started. Here's my keys." About half of the employees on shift walked out right there when he did. Almost everyone else quit within the next week. The last I heard, the only people who didn't quit were the 2 friends of the kid who never did his job. Story 26. I worked for a pretty famous hotel in Virginia Beach. Some of you may have heard of it, the Cavalier. The original hotel was erected in 1927, and a new hotel was built across the street in 1973. I worked in the banquets department, where we set and ran parties and events at both the hotel and one of our many banquet halls. Some of the people in my department had worked there since the 1950s. One little old lady I worked with had been there since they had renovated the old original building and before they had even erected the new modern hotel across the street. Up until 2 years ago, the hotel was run by Mr. and Mrs. Dixon, who made their fortunes running kyanite mines. Well, some of the Dixon family members sued me and Mrs. Dixon on the grounds that they were not getting their fair share of the money. When the verdict came down, they had to liquefy all of their asset. While they kept a hold of the mines, the hotels were auctioned off to the highest bidder, who just so happened to be Bruce Thompson of Gold Key Resorts. Now, Bruce, for the past decade or so, has been buying property all over Virginia Beach, and with his wealth has been funding politicians and people of power and influence to gain favor in the local government. As of today, he has the mayor, the governor, and many city councilmen on his side due to his funding of their campaigns. With all that power and influence, he's been able to raise the taxes of the people in the beach to get city funding on all his development projects, so his company spends little of its actual money to do anything at once, really. When Bruce finally finalized the deal for the hotel underwent a gradual shift from a family-owned company to a corporate machine. Our breaks were cut in half. Many departments were terminated with no notice. They literally hung a sign up on the door telling our painting and maintenance department their services were no longer required. Me and the people in banquets went untouched, except our then boss. But that's an entirely different story. Seeing as most of our money in the non-tourist seasons came from weddings and parties, we all kept our jobs, and actually got a pretty good increase in hours due to us now having to do the functions of all the departments that were let go. So if we had no parties to set for, we were painting parking lots or clearing out basements. Well, this continues for a few months until the next fall. The banquet team was tasked with setting up a room with 50 rows of chairs, about 500 chairs or so in all, in our main function hall. After we spend most of the morning setting this room up, we are told to wait in the room for our next instruction. As we're sitting there, we start to notice more people that work with us start walking into the room. Now, we weren't idiots. We know what the hell was going on. We've all been expecting it for months. So a representative of the company comes up and tells us what we all knew. Since they were doing a complete renovation of the hotel and all the surrounding area, including buying out people's mortgages, they no longer needed to keep the hotel open, thus no longer needing the workers. And in one fell swoop, they let everyone go. The president, who had been there for 30 years starting in the banquet department, the little old lady who had spent most of her life in the hotel, the college students trying to make enough money for education, and me, the banquet captain, who was looking forward to an unemployment check. Story 27. Not exactly the same, but once at a small company, we had this one guy everybody hated who quit infrequently. He would usually go on a bender for a few days and then come back and go back to work like nothing had happened. And the owner didn't say anything about it, and neither did he. He and the owner were both acerbic of holes. He made money for the company, and the owner didn't work in the field with him, so I guess he didn't care. Anyway, one day this guy had pissed off a whole bunch of people even more than usual, had a fight with the boss, and quit. 10 minutes later, the whole field group, maybe 6 or 7 guys, assembles at the owner's office and says, "Hey, look, you hire the guy back again and we're all quitting." I run into the guy occasionally in the field. He's a contractor like me. He learned nothing from the experience and is still a piece of crap. Story 28. I worked at a locally owned pizza shop, and I can say a combination of poor management and me quitting caused the business to go under completely. When I worked there, this was years ago, I was maybe 16. I got paid $5.35 an hour. I worked almost every day after school plus the rush Thursday, every week. I worked hard in there, in a crappy, damn, sweaty, hot, smelly environment to get crap right and get it to the customer. I came in early on days when I didn't have school to make sauce, make dough, do kitchen prep, etc. After a while of this, I went to my lazy-ass boss and said, "Hey, Pat, I do an awful lot of the work around here, and I think I deserve a raise." Pat said, "Okay, we'll see what we can do." Fast forward to next paycheck, sure enough, I got a raise 5 damn cents per hour. 5 cents. I said, damn that, went to Pat again to put in my 2 weeks. She told me how entitled I was acting and how my job title of line cook was a minimum wage position. I might as well have been the manager, considering she took off promptly at 6 p.m. every night. Her 8 hours were 10, 6 weekdays, didn't work weekends, and left me and the crew to handle dinner rush. Anyway, long story short, I quit on the spot after the entitlement comment, walked inside to grab my crap, told the rest of the crew what happened, and everyone else walked out with me. Everyone. Both her drivers, both the other line cooks, and even the drunk ducker who was our dishwasher. Within 6 months, that pizza shop, which had been in my town for at least a decade, possibly longer, was a hair salon with a new owner. Story 29. I worked in a tech support call center for some very crafty online backup software. The supervisors treat you like computers. They don't care about your feelings or workload. They just wanted short call time. They didn't care that you were snowed in or bedridden. If you call out, you're written up. The place had a 155% turnover rate 1 year from people having enough. This year is on track for being the same. Personally, I quit when they tried to stop my wedding by calling me 2 days before my wedding and saying my time off wasn't approved. The time that had been put into the system and approved 6 months prior. What sucks is that the business probably won't go under anytime soon. The product rips people off so much that the company is making bank. And the economy is so bad that they know for every call center rep that quits, there's a poor sap that needs to pay rent to take. Story 30. My BF worked at a finance company in Manhattan. He's a web developer. Anyway, his boss announced his wife was pregnant. Barely 3 weeks later, he was fired. A woman came back from maternity leave and was fired shortly after. They give awesome severance package and make them sign a waiver saying they won't sue or talk about it. My BF and half a dozen others have since quit, despite the high salaries. I guess half a dozen isn't mass, but the company is startup and barely 40 people. Story 31. I used to literally work in hell. The real hell. This place was run by the most insanely tyrannical woman I've ever met. The industry is fairly specialized, but with the right in, you can break into it with certain background experience. It was medically related, so you can either have the specific education or a background in nursing, med assisting, etc. The staff was about 70 people. When I started, only about 7 of those people had been there greater than 1 year. In the year I worked there, I saw 36 people quit and 1 fired. After I left, 4 others followed within the month. These resignations would come in waves. Once 4 people put in their 2 weeks within 4 days of each other. 1 was a manager. The management was kind, but really run down due to the owner, president. Here's some of the problems. 1, huge pay gap. I was making less than $20,000 per year with industry-specific education, but found out the pay range was anywhere from what I had to $55,000 per for doing the same job with similar background. 2, the work distribution was skewed. I had 9 projects when I left, but others in my role had 2. 3, another reason the pay was so frustrating, the people making the least amount of money had majority of the work. 3, they lied. My area was hit with a sizable snowstorm in February 14. We were promised office closure at 11 a.m. pending that we all showed up at 7 instead of 8. This was so everyone could get home before the weather deteriorated. At 11 a.m., they announced that they changed their mind, and if anyone left, it would be taken out of their PTO. It started snowing really badly within 20 minutes. They released us at noon because all appointments had been canceled, and majority of the staff got stuck in the snow. Many took anywhere from 7 hours to commute. If we had left at 11, it wouldn't have been that bad. My boss got stuck and had to abandon her car and walk home. Sweet justice. Those were the biggest ones that I recall right now, but instances like #3 happened all the time. They were extremely manipulative and disloyal. They didn't value their employees and didn't care that we were mistreated. Good. Hardworking people are quitting all the time. I've seen people start working and quit within the month. I can't wait for the day they go out of business. And yes, I am very bitter. Story 32. The government sequester in 2013. I worked for a parts supplier. 95% of our customers were military projects and government contractors. A lot of projects were canceled, put on hold indefinitely. A lot of people in my company were laid off. Story 33. Our company was bought by a larger company. The sales and marketing team got a new boss. Within a week of the first meeting with the new boss, 75% of the team quit. No one outside of the team knew why. A few months later, I met the new head of sales and marketing. He was insane. When one of the top sales guys put his 2 weeks notice in, he was escorted off of company property within an hour. The next guy who resigned was told he had to work the rest of the week with no pay so he could transfer his accounts over. Story 34. In college, I worked for 2 grocery stores so that I could get full-time hours. One was a much bigger retailer, and the other was a smaller store that only had a couple dozen locations in the state. The first job will always go down as the worst job I ever had. It was dehumanizing. Do not talk. Do not move from this spot. They dictated what you could say to customers, and the head manager spent his entire shift in the office watching the cameras. From the day I was hired until the day I quit, I never said 6 words to him. I had to get the second job because due to the economic downturn, the store began cutting hours, to the point I went from 39 hours to 10, if I was lucky. Worse than that, I was only ever scheduled for 3 or 4, and they'd tell me to be on call as if I were a doctor or firefighter. They'd call during school hours, which they knew, and when I couldn't come in, they'd use that as proof I didn't really want the hours. The second job didn't have enough hours to go around, but the manager was a really good guy, easily the best manager I've had, and would try to pencil in people where he could. Things changed at the start of the new year, where the second store had seen higher profits and better performance than other stores in the area, and as a result were getting better funding and attention from corporate. Suddenly we had more hours to spare and the money to hire more help. They offered me a management position and I took it. But my first job was suddenly determined to make me see through my 2 weeks' notice, so I tried to honor that. I had been at the first job for 2 years and knew all of my coworkers. I had a good reputation because I kept people laughing, made the shifts go faster, and just got along well with everyone. When I put in my 2 weeks, I had a lot of them asking where I was going and if they were hiring. So I went to my other manager with their names and applications to see if there was anything he could do. He hired 13 new employees straight from the competition. I worked that job until I graduated, and some of those employees are still there. At one point, the first job offered me a position in management with a pay raise. I told them I'd call them and let them know. Told my other manager what they offered me. He did $1 better. Story 35. At this very moment, most people in my department at the hospital are looking for new jobs at our bosses' insistence. The hospital is going to be laying off a bunch of us soon, but refuses to tell us how many and when, or even what their criteria will be for deciding. Story 36. I did work for a software development company. The guy who was the current CEO, you could tell, really cared about the company and the people who worked there. My boss got along with him. Hell, all of the senior positions and team leads got along with him. Great. Hell, everyone did. All around nice guy. All around nice. Well, there was another man on the board of directors who was, without a doubt in my mind, legitimately bipolar. Previously, this didn't matter so much as nobody really reported to him or did anything with him aside from an occasional interaction, so it really didn't matter much. You'd sometimes hear him going off about something or another in a public fit of rage, but it didn't really affect anyone since he actually had little influence on the work that was done there. Well, over time, the bipolar guy ended up with more money and bought the aging CEO out of the company and took the reins. I mean, the guy was nearing his mid-70s at least. You can't blame him for wanting out. I'm sure he has retired very comfortably at this point. Now, you had very intelligent and smart individuals leading pretty much all of the teams that worked there, and their team members looked up to them without a doubt, who all would now be reporting to the bipolar guy. Needless to say, this didn't last very long, and they started leaving very quickly. You can't take incredibly talented employees and expect them to report to somebody who they'll constantly be wondering if they'll be talking to Jekyll or Hyde that morning. Over the span of about a month, all of the team leads left, including my boss and roughly 40 employees out of the 80-ish that worked there. There was a very drastic change of culture from what used to be a laid-back professional environment of mutual respect for everyone to one of accountability and corporate formality. This also started to become a penny-pinching era, and some of the devs were shafted on their overtime pay, which led to another exodus of about 10 more of them. It was honestly weird how quickly the office became a ghost town, although the whole thing amazed me quite a bit at how large of an impact one person in leadership can have. Story 37. Last year, I briefly worked as a caterer. I only managed to work 3 gigs before I quit. The reason being that my boss tried to fit in 12 people into one minivan. He did this because he was charging everyone $10, so he benefited from it. At one point, we all decided that it was stupid and reckless for 12 people to be inside a minivan, especially since we were all sitting in the back, Indian style. After arguing with him to get another car, we still went to work. After that day, I and a bunch of other people decided never to work there again. Story 38, I worked at Wendy. One of the shift managers quit for personal reasons, so the regional manager had all the other shift managers cover the now open shifts. The shift managers were now working overtime and didn't want to. They gave the regional manager a deadline of a month to get a new shift manager. A month goes by and the shift managers confront the regional manager because there's been no replacement. Turns out he hasn't even posted a job listing yet. They were so livid that all of them quit on the same day. Now the regional manager had to take all the shifts until he could hire new people, and he did a terrible job too. Normally, 6 people were working at a time at our location because it wasn't dead slow, but wasn't a hotspot. 6 usually only hitting for a few-hour overlap during expected rushes. With him as manager, he expected 7 people to be working always. This means he increased all of our hours as well and had no respect for the hours people usually worked. This caused another mass exodus of normal workers, including me, because I didn't want to work full-time while going to school. Story 39. Remember Walden Books? The bookstore in the mall? I had a friend who worked there as a store manager. They hired him to clean up the store. It was a total wreck. Dozens of unopened shipment boxes crammed in the back room, behind the cash wrap, even under shelves. He found new releases from 3 months back that were never available to buy. It was really, really bad. On top of that, the district manager who hired him told him he had 3 weeks to get the store in order without extra hours and without sales dropping. If you've worked retail before, you know this is impossible. My friend argues with the DM, and the DM basically tells him he doesn't care if they work off the clock to get it done. It will be done, or he'll turn the entire staff, fire them. So for 3 weeks, my friend and his staff worked 24 hours a day, only clocking in for allotted shifts. My friend would even sleep in the back room in a sleeping bag. And miracle upon miracles, he got it cleaned up before the deadline. The deadline comes and the DM comes back with 2 LP operatives. They start pulling the staff one by one to the back and grill them until they get them to admit to working off the clock. When they get to my friend, he tells them outright that the DM told him to do it, and the DM sat there and denied the whole thing. So he says to the LP guys, "How else would we get this done within the deadline time allotted? You knew what this store looked like before, and you know how much time we had." The LP guys just looked at each other, then fired the entire staff. That same day, a manager and 3 associates were hired. The DIM already had them in the wings and was just waiting for my friend to get the store in working order to pass it off to his friend. Story 40. I worked for Sushi, a sushi chain out of San Antonio with 8 stores across San Antonio, Austin, and the Dallas area. About 2 years ago, on a Thursday night, right around closing time, every single kitchen employee across all 8 stores walked out. Every single chef, cook, prep cook, even the dishwashers. The owner is from Mexico, and he had hired another fellow from Mexico to be the head chef of the company. Pretty sure both of their names are public record, but I'll leave them out, Jick. So corporate chef bro goes about getting jobs for all of his family and buddies back in Mexico. As the company expanded over 10 years from 1 store to 8, he gave virtually all of the head chef positions at all 8 stores to his brothers and brothers-in-law. They in turn hired people they knew back home, cousins, uncles, in-laws, etc. See where this is going? It gets better. In your typical restaurant, there's a pretty firm division between front of house and back of house, with a general manager, GM, presiding over all. Not so in the old Sushi, the GM couldn't tell the head chef crap. The kitchen was solely answerable to corporate chef bro and then to the owner. Eventually, ICE decided to do an audit of the company. Word gets to corporate chef bro, who is obviously not thrilled that a bunch of his family and friends will be out of work. He is informed that current chefs will be training new chefs to replace them. This notwithstanding long-forgotten empty promises that had been made to chefs. Kitchen staff about getting them work visas, permits. So, not willing to train their replacements and fearful that ICE could come at any moment. They decided upon a date and set about finding gainful employment elsewhere. On the chosen night, many of them also took all of the various sauces that are used on the rolls and dumped them in the streets. Why? So corporate couldn't reverse engineer them, because only the chefs knew the recipe. There was no corporate record of any of the recipe. In the days and weeks that followed, the company scrambled to reverse engineer the signature sauces and the entire menu, along with hiring and training completely new kitchen staff. The new chefs were for the most part slower and more expensive, but that's another story for another time. Story 41. I work at an advertising agency in South Africa. We once had to do a Christmas festive season card for one of our major mobile networks, Misson. The concept was to show a summer road trip, an image of a map with stops at some of the major tourist attractions in the country. The idea being that wherever you go in South Africa, MTN has you covered. At each stop, they gave a quirky description of the fun you could have there. A team then had to take the same concept and create a Christmas card for MTN Swaziland. Swaziland is a tiny landlocked country within say. That's very badly run by a terrible king with 15 wives. The team created a card showing the tourist spots in Swaziland and made a quirky comment about seeing all the king's 15 wives spending like there's no tomorrow at a local mall. Needless to say, the card actually ended up going to King Mswati himself, who was very insulted. Swaziland is incredibly poor, and the king is incredibly rich and abuses with his wealth, but doesn't want to come across that way. The king insisted that people were fired over the incident. People at MTN lost their jobs, and we told Swaziland that people had been disciplined over the incident, while really we all just thought it was ridiculous. Story 42. Not an en masse walkout, but sort of snowball effect. I worked for help desk that had pretty awful management. It didn't seem too bad when I was a grunt. After I got promoted to a tier 2 inches is when it became abundantly clear that management had no idea what they were doing. It started pretty simply when I asked if I would get any training on how to do my new position. I was told that it was on-the-job training, which is fine if that's what they actually gave me. What they meant was, figure it out on your own. That was annoying, but if that was only issue, I wouldn't be posting this. The wheels slowly started coming off. A couple people left, another got promoted out of the department. They never hired people to fill those places. Instead, they blamed my team for the lowered productivity. After about 6 months of declining productivity and management, convinced the issue was with the team, which was now down to half its original size. They instituted a policy where we had to report everything we did to management in real time. This was the beginning of the end for me. The proverbial straw for me came when they instituted a no-talking policy, in which we had to ask permission from a supervisor to speak. I left the company shortly after that, and so did about 80% of my team. Last I heard, they'd only replaced one of the 5 people that left around the same time as me. Story 43. In the summer of 2012, I was working at a Boy Scout camp when one of the senior counselors, who had worked at the camp for years, I think 7, came out as gay and was immediately fired by the council. This caused a massive uproar at the camp, and about half the staff ended up quitting in solidarity, including many of the area directors and the program director. The rest of the summer was definitely interesting, because we had to run a proper summer camp with 75% of our normal staff, even after new people were hired on to fill some of the emptied positions. Story 44. Used to work in retail, and a girl and guy started doing inappropriate things in our meat cooler. People started finding out after the first girl got upset after the guy took another girl in there. All 3 were fired for pulling meat in the meat cooler. Story 45. My mom used to work for a college. She started there as a secretary when the college was just starting out and gradually moved up until she was running the whole business department. Without her knowing, the college ran interviews and hired a woman to be her superior. They never asked my mom to apply for the position and never mentioned it to her until the day this woman is introduced to her. And my mom's boss informed my mom she was supposed to train this woman to be her boss for the department. My mom was clearly hurt and upset, but she needed her job and just couldn't quit. So she sucked it up and trained this woman while putting on her best face and being cordial. All the rest of the people who worked under my mom in the department could not stand this woman and were incredibly upset by the situation as well. One morning, my mom walks through the doors, and the boss of the college is waiting for her. He brings her into his office and fires her. Within the month, the rest of the department all quit as well, leaving them to hire and train all new people right before fall semester started. 6 months later, the woman they hired to replace my mom quit, and they had the balls to call my mom and ask her back. You can guess where she told them to shove it. Story 46. Once, a few people got fired or suspended from where I worked because of their involvement in a Super Bowl pool. It was the dumbest thing I've ever seen, and it all could have been avoided if the guy running it wasn't so brain dead. He was openly trying to recruit people to buy boxes on this grid he needed to fill. He was even asking managers at a company where gambling pools are forbidden. The company warned him about the rules, asked him to keep all talk of the pool outside of the building, and suspended him. When he delayed payment of the prize money to the winner of the pool, the first place winner said he would punch his lights out if he didn't get paid. They fired both of them, and a few other people were suspended for their involvement. Story 47. I was a server administrator at an office with 2 bosses. One was the management boss, and the other was the doctor. The doctor boss was always incredibly busy, so you'd take requests, complaints, etc. to the management boss. The problem here was that the doctor had veto power. This would work just fine, seeing as how it's a normal hierarchy situation, except that the management boss was basically the embodiment of a power trip. We had a log we had to fill out for when and how long you went to the bathroom. She stopped me once while walking in after an hour and 5-minute lunch to say, "Taking extra long lunches now, are we?" I was the only person running 6 servers for hosting several different programs, and told her once that I didn't get a printer fixed because I had a lot of projects going on at the time, and she spat back, "You have a lot of projects? You have no idea how many projects I have," then stormed off and didn't say another word of it. I gave them 5 weeks' notice because I had no help, and there was too much work to effectively get things done. And about 70% of the office also notified them they were quitting due to similar reasons, also including verbal abuse. I stayed on for a bit because we had negotiated a raise on the terms that stayed on to help keep it afloat. Stabilize things. Management boss promised me the raise would be on my next paycheck. Of course it wasn't. So when I mentioned that I didn't get it, she kept saying to talk to the doctor, who kept saying to talk to the management boss. After 2 rounds of that and Well, we didn't say when it started. I quit on the spot. Found out one of my favorite coworkers there, maybe even of all time, had stayed on, but was given so much work that he ended up hospitalized from the stress. That same coworker had put it best when he told me, "L'envoyen, when you're driving to the coast, you don't remember all the rest stops you take a piss at. No idea how they're doing now. Don't care either." Story 48. A friend I work with used to have a job with a large hardware store chain in the Midwestern US when he was out of high school. He got to go to different stores and try to steal stuff without getting caught. If he got caught, he had an ID number and the store chain owner's personal phone number for emergency. He told me about the time he went into one store and grabbed a couple of things and nonchalantly walked out. He wasn't caught, so he set the items in his rental car and went back. This time, he stuffed a couple of things under his shirt. Nobody noticed. The cashier waved. The third time, he went in and got something big that took 2 arms to carry. Nobody said anything as he walked out the door. So the fourth time, and several times after that, he got a cart and got big stuff, like a roll of carpet and a chandelier, and wheeled them out. And the employees actually helped him with all of it. Finally, he was standing there, and it was 8 p.m., and he had a parking space full of stolen crap in the parking lot. And nobody had said anything. So he called the store owner directly and told him what had happened over the course of the day. My friend said you could hear the angry silence on the phone for about 30 seconds. The owner told him to rent a U-Haul and put all the stuff in the U-Haul and then get a hotel room for the night. The owner then said he would be there first thing in the morning. The owner walked into the store the next day and promptly fired everyone who my friend had seen or interacted with who hadn't followed security protocol, and fired the manager and assistant manager as well. Story 49. Does Amazon count as an event for the Borders books and music? That being said, Borders higher-ups had no idea how to staff a company, how 60% coupons can impact their bottom line, and how to merchandise a store. RIP. Speaking as someone who worked for Borders and actually does merchandising for a very respected company. Story 50. When I was 16, I started a job at a grocery store working in the grocery department, stocking shelves. We had a large crew, 20 crew members every night. My first night there, I walked into the back room to find all of them opening cases of concentrated cans of Welch's GE juice. They then were throwing them against a wall up some stairs. It made massive holes, and the walls were stained purple. I remember a kid handing me a can, and I just went, "No thanks, I have to go see the manager for training." I never told anyone about it since it was my first day and all. As I worked there, I noticed they were all getting food from the deli that clerks weren't weighing, making it something small like 2 cents for a stack of meat. Even the cashiers were in on it, pretending to scan items and not doing it. One night, I was walking back to my car and looked above the store to see a whole mess of them on top. They climbed a dumpster to reach roof access. They started throwing 3 L bottles of soda off the roof right into the parking lot and entryway. Some dude nearly got nailed and fell to the ground. Then he ran full speed inside and told the manager. The workers escaped. They had it on camera but couldn't tell who the people were. They questioned every employee in the store. Thankfully, they never made it to me, as one of the culprits confessed. He also implicated every single employee that was part of the G incident, soda incident, and stealing. They mostly cared about stealing. All in all, 30 employees were fired on a single day. In the grocery department, we went from 20 people to 3. The only people left were me and a girl that started the same day and some older guy. Went from 0 seniority to top part-time seniority. It was wacky. Never seen anything like it since. Story 51. Aircraft manufacturing job, laid off after 9. 11. The loss of the Twin Towers by use of jets built by the company I worked for. Lost hundreds of orders, slowed our rate, and subsequently laid off 40% of our workforce over 3 years. Story 52. I worked through a staffing agency at the View plant in Chattanooga. Everyone had to do a minimum of 6 months with the staffing agency before they could become a VY employee and get the extra awesome benefits. It was okay. I enjoyed having the gym and the cafe. I got in awesome shape while I worked there, especially since the job itself is very physically demanding. I really liked my coworkers, but the swing shift schedule they had going was horrible. It switched every few days. I believe that they now have a manageable shift schedule. It also really sucked to be part of a huge corporation like that. You're a number, and if you do exceptional work, you get no recognition and are often left picking up others' slack. If you do good work, you get stuck with the harder jobs because they don't want a lazy person doing it. With the staffing agency, you only get 3 paid days off in a year and are written up for any unpaid day that you take. After 3 write-ups, you are fired. Anyways, the plant made 20,000 more cars than they needed and ended up laying off 700 of the staffing agency employees. I think it left less than 100 members of the staffing agency. When we were hired, we were told that there would never be layoffs. We thought we had job security. They said that they would keep us on a list to be called back if they needed us. Nearly all of us got a call back, but I only know of a handful of people that actually went back. I probably would have gone back if it wasn't for the swing shifts. That's definitely not for everyone. Also, I would be afraid of being left with the staffing agency and laid off again. Story 53. Amazon Fulfillment Center, the floor managers, AMS, were instructed that no overtime be given frequently throughout the year, and upper management, ops, told the AMS fix the overtime problem via adjusting associates' time punches. This went on for 3 years, until the labor board had over 100 complaints. Associates had quit by the hundreds by the time corporate came down with lawyers in tow. Associates were interviewed but didn't understand why, and were being asked to sign pre-printed surveys stating they were not instructed to come in early or stay late by management. This threw a huge red flag, as some associates wanted copies to have them reviewed by their lawyers. HR refused to provide copies and held the associates in the office until they signed the document. HR then started to explain that the longer they waited, that their numbers and daily tasks were being neglected, and it would be documented as insubordination. Associates then tried to leave using personal time that you can use at any moment and HR said they could not use personal and they would have to take points, negative attendance. The labor board just happened to send in a representative that arrived on site 10 minutes prior that security escorted to HR. The representative had listened to this tirade and then instructed the HR person of the labor laws and legal ramifications of what they just stated to the associates. HR then instructed the associates to go back to work. 2 days later, only 3 hours personal were left from 9. 4 AMS and 3 ops managers were fired. Of the associates that quit due to this practice, lawsuits were sorted out with labor board support. So before people start to praise this get of a workplace, understand the mind, duck they use daily to lie, cheat, and steal to get associates to hurt themselves, and lie through their HR and management's intimidation. Story 54. Worked a restaurant, and we had 4 staff members leave when they found out one employee was promoted. The only reason she got the job was because she was ducking the GM. She was fired within the month for doing heroin on the job and now has a baby with a juggalo. Story 55. Back in my last year of high school, a co-op opened up 2 minutes walking distance from my house. And like a boy wanting money, I got that $11 an hour bag get job. $3.50 over minimum wage at the time. Everything's going great. Making shrimp stacks, working with cool cats my age. Then hockey season. Tryouts are over, and I get my hockey schedule for the next 2 months. Eagerly, I go to the front-end supervisor and request those days off. What's this for? They ask hockey. I enthusiastically reply, we don't work around your hockey schedule here. Excuse me? Here, calls over manager. Yeah, you're going to have to quit hockey, arguably tasty, because we don't work around that here, the manager tells me. What a coincidence. I don't work here, I announce boldly. I'll be back in half an hour with my written notice, so I head home, write up my notice, and head back. Of course, people heard me and ask why I quit, so I explained to them why. But here's the kicker. This is Canada, so more than half of these employees play hockey. Most of the rest don't want to work there if all their friends quit. By the end of the next day, half their cashiers and all their bag sheets, bar 2, gave in their notice. When I dropped by for some delicious jalapeno dill chips a few weeks after my last day, the front-end manager's picture was taken off the wall and the store's hours were cut. Duck and Noon thought he didn't have to work around hockey in Canada. Story 56. I was hired by a man who owned 3 pizza chain stores. I trained at one store, worked there for a few months when I found out he wanted me to transfer to a different store, and after a few weeks become the manager. Woohoo. Well, the new store, the current manager, every single day spent a few hours on the phone with her, so screaming and yelling and crying right in front of customers. The employees would get high in the walk-in fridge. I'm actually not too bothered by that if they actually did any more work than the total minimum. So here I am, hired by the store owner, not the manager who had hired all her friends. They didn't like me. They called me a git. A goody two-shoes. They were absolutely right. I fired them all, except for one new girl that started there the week before I did. It was a glorious moment, the most giddy moment of my life. Mother Duckers won't help me mop the floor. You're fired. Story 57. My team of 5 was asked to replace a major piece of software that was critical to a large revenue-generating department in 11 months. Normal timeline for implementation is 24 months. And we were on the larger side of facilities going to his software. We were already understaffed, and over the year we worked countless overtime hours, traveled to the software vendor for training many times, and got the project ready on time. Go Live was a mess of 12 straight 16-hour days. But eventually we had the system in and stable, and it started to make the department better. The staff were promised bonuses for meeting the deadline and not slipping the date to be paid out from unused project funds. Despite hitting the go-live date and having more than $1 million left in the project pot, the IT team was criticized for most of the issues that happened during the 12-day go-live. The team lead was dismissed, and no bonuses were paid out. Within 3 months, 3 of the 4 remaining members left, and all the positions are still unfilled. The one who was fired got multiple job offers the same day, and the 3 who left all got multiple offers within a month of the project ending. The team lost 30 years of experience in a week, simply because management wasn't willing to protect them. Ironically, the manager who threw the team lead under the bus was canned 6 weeks later. Story 58. Apparently, shortly before I joined, my line manager gave a speech to his team about following their dream. 6 people decided to do that and handed in their notices. He's not allowed to give speeches anymore. Story 59. Worked in a call center for a not-so-reputable credit card company. Basically, our job was to get people to sign up and offer balance transfer. They would transfer their current balance from one credit card to ours. I never figured out how, but I was shockingly good at this job. Hated it, but I was good at it. Now, this was a few years ago, and security wasn't exactly on anyone's mind. One of my team members was a super nice guy, but then one day he didn't show up to work. And then we had a big meeting across the street at the local hotel. We were pretty much all told, 400 of us, I believe, that we were all being laid off as they had to do some major restructuring security-wise. The story is that teammate was writing down credit card numbers to a simple pad of paper and taking it home nightly. Somehow he was able to make a lot of cash advances on now empty credit cards and fled the country. To my knowledge, he never got caught. Their security solution was that no paper was allowed in the center anymore. Most people found new jobs by the time they took us all back, so we were down to maybe 50 people. I had another job but went back. I quit about an hour into it after some snide comments from a team leader how everyone was complaining how hard the last 2 months had been without a job. Story 60. Boss harassed 2 women. On the same day, he moved from one to the other after the first one told him she wasn't interested in having sex with him or being his mistress. Story 61. My brother used to work at a sushi restaurant and was on the sushi line. The owner had been pretty hands-off the entire time my brother was there and had basically allowed the managers to run the restaurant, and it was doing pretty well. Always busy and got generally good reviews. One day, the owner stepped back in and decided to take control again. After being out of the picture for over 2 years, he decided that he needed to clean house and fired half of the manager. Everyone was pissed about it, but decided to stick around still. A couple days later, the owner decides to fire 5 out of his 7 sushi chefs, including my brother. The 2 remaining sushi chefs quit on the spot when they found out about it. And by the end of the day, all the remaining managers, all the remaining kitchen staff, and almost all the servers had quit. The owner had to shut the restaurant down until he could hire new staff. The problem with that was that this happened in a relatively small town, and all the restaurant workers had heard about what happened, so nobody was applying to work there. He ended up having to close the restaurant. My brother now works at a much fancier sushi restaurant. Story 62? This will probably get buried. But I have to share this because the Red Lobster I cook at is currently embroiled in chaos. Everyone knows restaurants have high turnover, right? Crazy places that suck to work at. People quit a lot, it's a given. Well, in the past 10 days, all of my managers have quit, except for one who put in his 2 weeks, 1.5 weeks ago. One of my bosses decided to go back to school. Another one got into an argument with the GM and walked out. The GM himself walked out 2 days later, giving some vague explanation about his bosses being a hole. So, to be clear, the only manager left in the entire store is the one who already has a new job lined up and is planning on quitting this week. So approximately nobody gives a duck right now. I could steal thousands of dollars of shrimp, fish, steak, and lobster meat tonight if I wanted to, and I wouldn't get caught because there's nobody to do thorough inventory, or just notice that the cook is pulling boxes of shrimp out of the freezer. I could hide rubber duckies all over the store and cover the line in flamboyant confetti if I felt like it. All I have to do is answer to myself and my fellow employees. It's pretty great. Story 63. My employer, 2 employers ago, was in litigation for a long time over some stuff that happened years prior. They coasted along like that, doing a really good amount of business until the flak vest wearing, gun-totting, police swarming, interrogation, causing FBI raid. Pulling up to work to see the building being cleared out with armed FBI agents surrounding the building was truly a unique experience. Yes, there was a mass exodus after this incident. Within 3 months, a company of more than 100 employees was down to 7. Story 64. I was working as an last GM at a family restaurant chain, basically noon to midnight 5 days a week. I had hired, trained, and retained a great staff. In a normal restaurant, most of your staff are college students or adults, and maybe 10% or less are in high school, but not with us. Since we didn't serve alcohol, anyone over 16 could be a server or any other job with us, and that was most of our staff. When I turned in my notice and let the staff know, the effect was immediate. 3 servers who had planned to work for us through college turned in notice that they'd be leaving in a month. 2 more transferred to locations closer to their homes, and my 5-night closer quit and took a job in a pediatric office. In the kitchen, we lost 3 5-night cooks, 2 5-night prep, dessert, salad, saucier guys, and a busser. We also lost 3 carry-out hostesses. This all happened in a period of 4 weeks from my last day or coinciding with it. My replacement quit after 2 months and took a job as a cook. My GM was forced to retire by the end of the year. The new GM got caught stealing and went to jail. So, not saying I was the linchpin, but story 65. I worked for an airline as a mechanic. We had a 727 cargo jet in our hangar for months undergoing a D-check, a massive inspection and maintenance task that involves removing and replacing a lot of aircraft skin and structure, as well as wiring, equipment, etc. It is basically a massive overhaul of the aircraft. While this task is ongoing, the aircraft is lifted up on jacks that fit under the wings, nose and tail of the aircraft. Anyway, back to the skins being replaced. Lots and lots of panels were riveted into place over the course of weeks. Lots. When the day came to lower the aircraft because all of the work was done, someone in charge forgot to place anybody on the tail jack. As all of the other jacks were slowly lowered the tail, Jack suddenly punctured the mounting point at the tail and basically opened the tail like a zipper. It sounded like the machine gun fire as the sheared rivets sprayed across the hangar. Within minutes, every person standing in that hangar was fired. Just about everyone was hired back the next day, but at that moment, some pretty important people lost their jobs permanently. Story 66. 7 years back, we had an office Olympics. Each team had to come up with a team name and a flag for their team. A team chose the name Team Shockers. They made a flag with 2 hands doing the shocker sign. They called me in, office pervert, and showed me the flag. I told them you can't put that out. The guys said we checked with the team manager, and he said it was okay. It was up for over a week with no problems. Apparently, one of the older office ladies asked someone what it meant. All hell broke loose. The flag was taken down pretty quickly. HR got involved. 3 employees and the manager were fired. They had all been with the company about 10 years. Worst part was, we didn't even get to compete in the office Olympics. Lots of shocker jokes since that happened. Story 67. I don't know what counts as mass. Borders had a round of emails to management boiling down to, if you would not do this job for free, then quit. So a lot of people did. Story 68. One day, some bean counter at corporate headquarters comes up with the bright idea to increase profits by laying off a large group of the most highly paid, well-liked supervisors and key employees. Somehow, it didn't occur to them that those people were responsible for both creating money and keeping the company from losing money. Meanwhile, all of the top executives remained in place, untouched. Those top dog compensation boys had more than tenfold of the average worker, yet performed virtually no real function other than golf buddies, cousins, and brother-in-laws to the CEO. The immediate result was that moral and productivity went down to zero. Huge and costly errors were continually made. Clients and contracts were lost. The laid-off employees went to the competition, and I with the remaining good employees followed them shortly after. Less than a year, the company closed. The sad shame of it all was that this all happened while the company was at its peak and the economy was great. They were once the most highly respected and innovated in the industry. We all thought we would happily retire from there someday as old men and women. The CEO passed of a massive heart attack about a year after they closed down. Story 69. I never worked there, but there's a chain of grocery stores called Market Basket near me. It's family-owned, and there was a dispute where the cousin came in and fired the very beloved CEO of that company. As a result, the employees and suppliers went on strike and quit. I went there during the middle of this, and the store was still open, but it looked like a ghost town. No fresh produce or meat and hardly any staff. It was a decent-sized story, and a very big success story for businesses that care about their employees and strong leadership. It's actually a great place to get groceries, too. I find that they have a better selection of certain things and lower prices than their main competitor around here. New Hampshire. The board of directors caved in and rehired the CEO a month or 2 after the strike, and the stores were back to normal within days. Really cool story. Story 70. We saw the way the company was going. Suddenly, contracts weren't being renewed, and then people were getting fired for silly policy violations. Then they said we can't do raises this year, things like that. It was obvious they were getting ready to do mass layoffs, so most people walked before it happened. Sure enough, the week before Thanksgiving, we were all given 2 weeks' notice and told our jobs were now in the Philippines. Since I was in the IT department, I was given an extra 4 weeks to help clear up. But I got a lucky break, and so started a new job with much higher salary before the 2 weeks were up. The funny epilogue is that about 6 months later, they wanted to hire me back with a 25% pay raise. I guess the outsourcing didn't work out so well. I politely told them where to shove their job. Story 71. I worked at a summer camp, and one of our kitchen staff members was fired because a helicopter mom thought that he had been rude to her precious little snowflake. So the staff all got together, and a strong majority agreed that the snowflake had been a rude little crap in most of the classes, activities, and deserved to be told to sit the duck down and eat what everyone else has. So about 2 of the staff marched down to the camp office and sent in a representative who told the directors that if he goes, we all go, the operations director claimed. We couldn't get solidarity, and this was just a stunt by 2 or 3 of us. But when he came outside, he found 25 of his staffers with bags packed and ready to roll. The kitchen staffer was serving waffles the next morning like nothing had happened. Story 72. My brother had a company making vinyl screen protectors for electronic devices. I was brought in to run manufacturing, customer service, and quality control. I basically was in charge of everything besides the sales department. After working there for 3 years, I had assembled a great team, 35 people. Everything ran smoothly, and the company was making a hefty profit. My brother sold off his ownership in the company to take a high-level job with one of our product distributors. After he had left, people started stepping on my toes and changing rules and benefits I had arranged for my department. One day I had had enough, packed everything from my desk into my mini fridge, and walked out. Once word got out that I had quit, 27 other people packed up and did the same. 6 months later, and still struggling to replace my team with temp workers, the business folded. Customers weren't receiving orders, and when they did, they were wrong or damaged. They called me 2 months after I left and offered my job back with double the pay, and I refused. Story 73. I once worked for a small bank. Turns out the CEO was hiding money in strange places, making unqualified low-interest rate loans to friends, and just generally using the bank as his personal slush fund. Well, one day the feds came in, installed a temporary CEO, and started firing, and in some cases charging, several of the senior staff. A few did jail time. I got called in by the temp CEO, who I'd never met before. It was a day off for me, and arrived just as they were telling somebody else they had called in that their services we no longer needed. I was 100% sure that I was going to be the next to get the axe. Turns out, though, that they just wanted to make sure I was okay with doing extra hours while everything got settled down. Funny thing was, with about 6 employees gone, we never noticed any additional work, so I guess they weren't really doing much in the first place. Story 74. Competing company in a similar but not identical line of business tried for years to replicate our product with no success. They scrapped the project and took the RD money and bought our company instead. Fired 600 people in one day. I was one of them. I hear from those who remained the place is awful now. Story 75. My job currently got bought out by a new owner. This guy is an all-round duckwit who cuts corners and tries to save money by reusing old ingredients, forcing us to not throw out our food. Pretty much just everything bad he could do, he is doing it. Since he took over around 3 months ago, 8 people have quit and 3 more ready to go. All-round crafty guy. What is the most fireable thing you have seen someone do at work that didn't get them fired? Stole $40,000 from the company. How did she not get fired? That person reported it to CPS. CPS investigated and the guy figured he had nothing left to lose, so he reported her for grand larceny. They both got arrested on the same day. Story 2. When I worked retail, I once challenged a customer to step outside and fight. The customer, I'll never forget this, said, "Dude, you're at work," and walked out, shaking his head. Sometimes the customer is right. Story 3. A security guard pleasure himself on a bed in one of our unused rooms for our clients. I work in a residential adolescent mental health facility. For a month until someone found the bed absolutely covered in semen. Badge scanners were checked and the guy was identified. But instead of firing him, he was just moved to the guard shack. Story 4. It was me, but I faked a coworker's death by putting a makeshift memorial up in his assigned parking spot on April 1st. It had his picture, flowers, a handful of candles. The whole deal. The head of HR was not amused. Everyone else loved it, though. To make matters worse, this was during peak pandemic. I had just returned from a small vacation and had no idea my friend I did this to had been out for 3 days due to suspected pandemic. Story 5. Supervisor freaked the duck out on the sales guy and just clocked out. It was a super busy shipping day and he was just done. He got to the end of the driveway and turned around and clocked back in, and they just acted like he didn't tell them to duck off. Story 6. Had a guy at work do these things during his time at a place I worked and he never got fired. Accidentally set fire to the trees out back whilst taking a pee. He was bored and lighting ants on fire. Fire truck had to come put it out. Scorched earth, ignored instructions from a spotter and dropped a $250,000 machine whilst the spotter was under. Luckily, the legs on the machine prevented it. Threw a plastic 55G drum at the owner in a fit of drunken rage. Got pulled over 25 minutes away from work, 25 minutes after his shift, and got a DUI, blew a 0.21 and was in the local paper. Got drunk on moonshine from the back fridge, went into the bar bathrooms during business hours, and pulled his infected tooth out with a pair of channel locks, stole the bartender's tips, and drove home. Bathroom was an absolute disaster. Routinely stole cash, beer, and merch. Threw a glass at me once, but that wasn't really all that bad. Pulled the wrong valve off of the bottom of a tank and lost 800 gallons of beer before I could get it back on for him. Some of the things from the top of my head. It was a while back now, but he eventually quit. Story 7. Accidentally send out the entire company, 3,000 plus employees, headcount to the company distro. File contained everyone's salary, birthday, government numbers, etc. Story 8. What are you gonna do? Fire me? I'm your only line cook that'll take 3 waiters, a busboy, and the dishwasher with me if I leave. I was the dishwasher. Story 9. Worked at a video game retailer. Yeah, that one, back when I was fresh out of college. The Nintendo Wii 2 was due to be released the following week, and we were no longer taking pre-orders. Some guy comes in with his girlfriend and wanted to pre-order, but couldn't. So he tried to bribe my coworker with $20 to get one anyway. Store was full of customers, and our supervisor was present. Coworker busts out laughing, walks around the counter, puts an arm around the guy's shoulder, literally busting a gut, wheezing with laughter. Suddenly he stops laughing, looks the guy dead in the face and yells, $20? Guy's face turned bright red, and his girlfriend and the entire store started laughing at him. Never saw the guy again. Manager said that was hilarious, but don't ever do that again. Coworker was let go months later for gift card fraud shortly after I was promoted and transferred to another store. Story 10. Watched a coworker rent an entire big box retail store parking lot to a BMW dealership for cash on the side so they could park excess inventory. Corporate didn't know. He pocketed all the money. Story 11. Long ago, when bookstores existed in the mall, I worked for one that had satellite calendar kiosks during the holiday season. Dude who was working at the kiosk accidentally put 2 endorsed by the register checks into his pocket instead of in the till and went home. At the end of the night, there were some frantic phone calls made to figure out where this check went so they could balance the register. When I came in the next morning, the assistant manager, who had dealt with the whole situation, was visibly frustrated that dude had not even been written up. He was such a weird guy. Always stared a little too long after you finished talking. Story 12. Not do her job. Find any excuse to avoid work. Spend half the day chatting on the phone, then work unapproved overtime, claiming that she had too much work and needed to catch up. Yes, I'm talking about you, Stephanie. Worst coworker I ever had. Story 13. Smoking. Being visibly high on crack. Overdosed on the job multiple times. Everyone in department, including management, knew this was going on. He was 4th-year electrical apprentice who could not pass journeyman's exam because, crack. Story 14. Saying in front of HR, and I quote, "All right, which one of you boys is going to slap my face, grab my throat, call me a dirty escort, and spit in my mouth?" Story 15. In my life, I had one job outside of being self-employed. Head of the IT department for a local retailer with 3 in-state locations and 2 out-of-state locations. Everything was going great. New websites built, new software for the employees to list items online built, new inventory system set up, marketing going well, etc. This was until nepotism kicked in. See, we were doing millions in ad buys on TV, and lo and behold, the son of the lady we did these buys through needed a job. So he's hired, and it was immediately clear this kid had no clue what he was doing. But he had some pull. He fancied himself a nerd, so he started tinkering with our site. Not a DV branch. I'm talking production, the live website. Soon after we got hacked, it took me some time to find out how the shell got onto our server. Turns out Dipcrap, while making his unneeded changes, ducked with various security settings on our site. This led directly to us getting owned. It was all in the logs. I documented what he did and the consequences of it. We had to take the website down so internet sales immediately stopped. I had to go through all of the source code to make sure there weren't any other backdoors lurking. It was a PETA. The kid never faced any consequences for this. I quit soon after and went back to self-employment. Fun times. Story 16. He was a manager. Girl wanted to get hired. He told her he would hire her if he got a BJ. She agreed, and he went to the bathroom and waited. Instead, she went to his manager's office just down the hall and reported him. Instead of getting fired, he was demoted 1 step. I think because of lack of evidence. But this is totally something everyone that knew him would agree is something he'd do. He never made it back to manager even though he constantly tried. That's some justice, but that should have lived in a box for that. Story 17. In a hospital, the person went out to get a patient and called out in the waiting room, "Where's my little insert name of disease the infant had? Baby." Basically just told all the people in the room what disease the baby had, and the mother's jaw dropped and was furious. Nothing happened. She ended up quitting on her own 4 years later. Story 18. Worked at a deli for a summer that hired a bunch of high school kids with a large, sweaty, checked-out manager. I was one of the high school kids. One of the other 2 had a block of Havarti cheese they just opened to cut off 6 slices for an old lady. It was near the end of the day, so instead of putting the rest of the block of cheese in saran wrap and in the refrigerator, he put it down the garbage disposal. Just pushed it down with barbecue tongs while doing the shh gesture at me with his lips and other index finger. I just thought, well, that's ducked up. Story 19. I work at a country club, and you really have to duck up to get fired. Years ago, at a different club, we had a wedding coordinator who had gone out to lunch with managers. She got hammered. Instead of taking her home to her apartment, which was on the way home, they brought her back to the club. They basically had her hang in our back maintenance office to sober up. Ironically enough, this was also where we kept the coolers of beer and alcohol. Anyways, later that evening, my boss at the time had stuck around, which wasn't abnormal as he and another guy would hang back there and have a couple of beers. At one point during the wedding, she was supposed to be coordinating. I had to grab something from the back office. There were two doors to this room, one from the hallway of the building and one that led to the outside loading dock area. I had come to the latter where the door was open and peered inside. My boss was sitting on his office chair, and she was there. Didn't look like she was BJ him, but was about ready to. I turned around and realized I didn't need whatever I needed that badly. Later on, I went back, and both of them were gone. It wasn't until the wedding was over that I saw her again, with her hair all messed up, clothes messed up as well. Pretty obvious what happened. Maybe a few months later, the activities director who would stick around and drink some beers with my maintenance manager confronted me, drunkenly, after I had voiced my displeasure about them hanging around drinking while I tried to work, got in my face and told me not to duck with him. This freaked me out as I was a 20-year-old kid. I ended up calling corporate and left a message about the situation. As it was a Friday night, nothing happened until Monday. When I was called into the GM's office with him, HR and the GM, I was basically confronted with, why didn't you come to us first? Working at country clubs for roughly 17 years, I could write a memoir on all the crap I've seen. Story 20. A guy got a DUI and lost his license for 3 months and didn't tell anyone at work about. He drove a company truck daily for work and they only found out after he got his license back. I know he was still there 5 years later. Story 21. I was doing some kind of apprentices, studying and working thing. During semester breaks, we were working or would need to take time off. That meant informing who you were working with as soon as you would know. Going through a tool process for requesting your time off, checking back it was approved. People were surprised when a colleague didn't show up on the first day after the semester. He hadn't called in sickum. After not being there until midday, the department he should be at called our supervisor. The supervisor checked if there were time off or sickness, and they simply forgot to inform department. Nope, so they called him. It took more than one try, but he answered and told them, "Oh yeah, I'm in New York. Sorry I forgot to inform the department or put in time off. I won't be there until 2 weeks." He was not fired, and this would be one of the few actual offenses for which that underscore would have been possible, which is hard in my country, rightfully so. Even worse, he was also not made to return immediately, and I never heard anything about any other repercussions, albeit I simply may have missed them. I'm still blinking and wondering. That's not a oopsie. It's traveling to another continent. It takes months of planning, yet no one even knew. He didn't simply forget to enter it. He told underscore no one underscore. Not even colleagues, and nothing came of it. Story 22. Literally not working. She would get to work at 6:30, and I would see her leaving as I pulled in at 8 o'clock. Her boss hadn't even arrived yet. This was like 5 days per week. She maybe stayed till 2 o'clock on the good days. They tried to fire her, and were told it was impossible to fire anyone for anything at a university. They waited for the grant to run out, and then didn't put her on the new one. It took 2 years. Story 23. Co-worker leveled a gun threat at me after almost 2 years of bullying and petty harassment. I took it to HR after keeping my manager informed of each incident and kept notes and records of each time he did something. All he got was a stern talking to and was told to leave me alone. He got a slap on the wrist for a gun threat in a school, all because he's our best mechanic. Story 24. Worked a 24-hour shift doing manual labor, then got into a truck, drove 2 HRS to another site, do another 8-hour shift, coerced a few underlings to join him. Then they had to drive home, 34 hours of working without sleep, driving public roads in that state thinking they were tough as crap. The boss was an absolute scumbag, but even he had the sense to know that this was truly irresponsible. This was solely on the head of the narcissistic egomaniac foreman who thought he was the toughest badass around, and only those who could follow him were the good workers. Needless to say, I opted out. I wasn't on the foreman's good side, and he made my life hell for 2 years. In a way, I'm thankful I learned so much about life and people in that time. I hit a massive low point in my life working with that man, but I came out stronger at the other end. He was never reprimanded for this, and all the other things he did, which was unfortunate. But I'm happy to now be earning way above what he is, and he's probably still destroying his body in the name of being a rough kid. Story 25. We had an office luncheon for Thanksgiving one year on a Friday. They served wine at lunch. We were a smallish company back then with about 50 people. After lunch, the managers would hole up in a conference room and get hammered. This year, they decided to let a few select other employees come in. They invited one of our programmers and a few others. Apparently, this guy had drank almost 2 bottles of wine at lunch alone. Then he started pounding back the liquor like crazy. By 3, he was running up and down the halls, yelling at people, challenged a few people to a fight. He then laid in the floor of the conference room and started kicking and screaming and crying. They called his wife to coke, pick him up when he first started to get out of hand, but she was about an hour away. When she got there, 2 guys had to load him into an office chair and wheel him out the door to put him in the truck his wife was driving. He then proceeded to vomit on himself in the truck as they were closing the door. She was told to take him to the hospital he checked out. He showed back up to work on Monday like nothing had ever happened. He wound up getting fired a few months later because he made a really bad error with code that cost the company a lot of money, and he screamed that he wouldn't sign the write-up, so he was terminated then for insubordination. There was also no more alcohol allowed at any employer function that did not include clients. Story 26. A director of customer engagement, publicly in a department-wide recorded meeting, told everyone he was going to participate in wage theft against his subordinates. I've never downloaded and saved a Zoom meeting faster. Then, when he didn't get reprimanded or anything, I took that video to the labor board and sued them for wage theft. It just boggles my mind how a popular, well-known startup would allow someone like that to remain on staff. Last I heard, half the call center was going after them for wage theft under the same condition that I did. Story 27. I used to be a chemist in the lab, and I swear every lab had one psycho. Our resident psycho had it out for one of the girls for some reason and had to be physically restrained by another guy from attacking her. He didn't like something she was talking about. He was an angry chauvinist. Another time, he threatened to bash her head into the glass window. Management and HR did absolutely nothing. In fact, they blamed her. She ended up taking him to court and filing a restraining order. He was forced onto a different shift and had to leave the property before she came in. Way to protect your own employees. A holes. Oh, and he accused everyone of being secretly gay together. Good time. Story 28. It's a tie one. Supervisor engaged in sexual intercourse with one of his associates bent over her workspace. 2. Supervisor leaving a company function, hit 2 cars in front of 3 cops, ran a red light, then drove back to the plant, across the back lot, bogged down to the axles, and was caught trying to run away on foot. Story 29. One of my previous bosses would show up 4 days a week, either completely crap-faced or just reeking of booze. He'd stumble in around 10, 11 a.m., then just slump over and sleep in his chair until 2 p.m., when he'd typically say, "I'm just going to finish work at home today." He never got anything done. He had piles of overdue work on his desk that we needed signed off on, so much that it would get lost on a regular basis. Since he was so unorganized, he'd typically make me stay over on Friday evening to clean up his messes, redo his work. Since it was the last day of the week, I couldn't leave early to offset overtime, so I would have to claim overtime for the week. In order to not get in trouble with payroll, he started to alter my time cards to cut my overtime by extending all of my lunches 1 hour. I caught on when I was expecting out on a check and only got 39 hours instead. I reported this to HR as just a, "Hey, my hours were wrong, can you adjust?" Turns out he thought this was my way of getting him in trouble, so he started to make excuses about my work performance and denied me a promotion that he had previously asked me to put in for. He eventually filed for HR to terminate me 1 week after my dad passed away because I was distracted at work. It was clear that it was retaliation, and I said this to HR, but again, they took his side. Story 30. I had a person in the mid to late stages of training as a 911 dispatcher get the address incorrectly 3 times, violate policy in getting the location, fail to give proper CPR, hang up and start mocking the panicked caller who was calling her an idiot. And when the medics showed up, realized that it was a bad location, and the medics were a block away. She showed no remorse whatsoever and insisted that it was the panicked caller's fault. The man, as it turned out, had been dead for an hour or more, so CPR could not have helped. But the employee didn't know that and didn't properly try to ask. I was told to allow the trainer to continue training, and eventually they passed. And I was told that as a supervisor, I was to notate future issues. And the best I could do was read the employee the riot act and tell them that this was not our standard. In the meeting where I chewed the trainee out, they continued to accept no blame or guilt or make any move towards repairing their mistake. I was still not permitted to take further action. I believe it was hoped that she would leave on her own when the weight of expectation and the realization of her own incompetence was too much. But that did not happen. At least she left because she felt she was being picked on. Because after release, everyone was pointing out her constant mistakes. And also she threw a temper tantrum because another dispatcher's boyfriend wouldn't sleep with her.